Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about distortion maps. It lets you do a host of things, a lot of visual effects type things. It's just going to be a basic introduction. In the future we'll do some specific tutorials. This is just to talk about how it works, some ideas of how you can use it in conjunction with other things. We'll get to it here. So we check this out. Sorry, this is a bad example. I have some stuff going on here from Breath of the Wild. This is when the smoke comes up. This one doesn't show very well, but this fire back here, the way it ripples and things like that. It's a really basic concept, but it's cool, like what you can end up doing with it. So let's just jump right in. So if this, we'll take a glance at this fire effect and go through how it works, and then we'll take a glance at the shader and show off a couple other things. So most basic concept of the distortion map, how they work, is that it takes the UVs, which is the sort of texture data. Like you have a texture like over here, and I believe it comes from, because X, Y, Z, and W are already on the like 3D space, and so the 2D space is the UV. So basically it's the information on the X and Y axis, or UV axis, on a texture map. And so generally when you unwrap something, or excuse me, not unwrap, but when you just draw something like in a shader, you simply take this information and just sort of draw it, one-to-one. We got this quad mesh here, it's just a square. So it looks at, this texture here. We've done a little bit because of the shader, so it's not exact. And we've stretched it out, but basically, takes it up here. You know what I'm saying? It's just one-to-one. It just stamps it on there. So what we want to do is take those UVs and mess with them. So let's take a glance at the shader. This is pretty universal, but there's going to be some stuff that's Unity only in here. You have this transform texture, and these other texture functions for like taking a texture and grabbing like the color information and then drawing that onto the screen. That's basically what the shader does. We take these UVs that are just intrinsic, generally, like, just from the texture that you give it, and then we just mess with it. Like, it's that simple. Sorry, it took a long time to get to to say that, but basically, like when you run this here, normally you're getting your color data here, COL. It's this texture 2D function. We take that main texture, take these main IVs. The I comes from this fragment shader parameter, or I don't know if parameter's the right word, but basically it's just the UVs based on just the texture and the transformations that were done, scaling and stuff. And like if it was on a mesh, like rather than just a quad. Anyway, we take those UVs and we push them around. Generally, like, it's a bad thing. Like, you get UV distortion, like when you're trying to unwrap your mesh and things like that, something you're trying to fight. But here, we use that power to do some cool stuff. So, something you'll see a lot, is using what's called Worley noise. So you can look that up here, from Wikipedia. It's they're noise functions, and they come from like cellular sort of concepts. You know, simulating textures of stone, water, or cell noise. You know, that's why I have like, these spots and things like that. But really, you can do anything, and we'll learn that. So anyway, let's finally get to it. So we have this whirly noise here that we put in. In the shader here, we have all these different powers that sort of control like the influence of it. Actually, get rid of this mask for a sec, so it applies uniformly. Make everything normal here. So we have this here. What happens is that we're going to push the UVs based on this texture data. So let's actually like turn that power on. So as we do it, you can see this starts to distort. We'll push it up like that. So what it's doing is looking at this texture. Make it bigger. From there. You know, and is pushing those UVs around. So instead of, you know, when it's drawing the pixel in this upper left-hand corner, instead of grabbing the upper left-hand corner texture from here, it's being pushed specifically just in the Y direction, because that's what we've set it to do, which is up and down. You know, times 4 based on that value here. So if it's white, it's going to push a lot. So it actually went like, you know, really high up or really far down. I'm not sure which way I have to set up on this one. And just that simple concept lets you do tons of stuff. You can see here how it's transforming it. We'll grab a couple others. Have this one. And with the shader you can invert it. Oh no, I have some weird stuff with like clamping that you'll have to deal with. But here, you know, you can see you can already, you're like creating particles basically, even though you have like a flat texture, which is really cool. Whoops. Let's put it in there. Do stuff like that. It's sort of like a personal thing, but it's good to think about. You know, a lot of the stuff's going to look really cool, but it's good to keep in mind stuff that's a little more like practical or realistic. You know what I mean? Like, so have that, and then here we just have another one. It just does it again. Just lets you have some secondary distortion. With this fire effect, I was just messing around and I had, oh, that's actually the mask. I had it in the wrong spot. I had this secondary one here. Do the Y based on this. Anyway, it just lets you have like some secondary stuff. So you can have like an initial thing that sort of creates sort of like your fire shape. We'll try this one, like that one. And then this one can do some secondary stuff. You can just distort it more to like maybe get like a perfect fire shape, or you can create some like waves, which is what we end up doing. So we'll just leave that in there. So anyway, if we increase that power, and then here we'll add this gradient mask. So what this does, or a distortion mask, it further, you know, we have this power setting that shows how much to distort it. This will distort it based on, you know, this texture here, but then we further limit it from this mask. So this is like a really common way to create fire. So what this does, like down here, when we're at the bottom here, it's not really distorting at all. And then as we move up, you know, this gets white, we distort it more. Now let's animate it a little bit. So further what you can do, you know, I have just built into the shader here. So what it's doing is it's panning this distortion texture over our regular texture. And so how it distorts is going to be based on, you know, how it's projected, you know, compared to this. So like we're sliding the distortion over it. And then this mask, you know, stays in place, so that way it just stays light up here, or, you know, heavy distortion up here and little distortion down here. And then again, we can have this one here, where we can further distort it. And if I turn it up all the way, you know, it was just some kanji I had from like an attack. You have it going on. You can do like cutout stuff like that. You can do that with masking too. But just coincidentally, this looked really good when I was just like animating it over it. So that's what I mean, where you can get some like, you know, secondary distortion, where you can do some like pulsing type things. Shrink this down. Sorry, this isn't tiled very well, so you're going to see some stripes going through there, but you can see how it like pulses up and down with that. And you could animate that if you wanted as well. Let's try, that might not look so hot. Oh, that looks better. So it's doing the same thing. We can up the power to show what I mean. And then we can increase the speed too. You know, you get stuff like that. Here we just have like a straight mask. This is just like an overall mask, like right at the end. And so you can see here, you can just mask it out even more. I currently have it to, it says gradient, but right now it doesn't use a gradient map. It just takes the color data from your initial texture. You know, we could do this instead. Drop that on there, grab this mask off. So now, you know, we have way different character. Still a fire sort of effect. A lot of that comes from this, which is saying, you know, little distortion down here, a lot of distortion up here. A lot of times you'll see it where people don't even have like initial texture data. It's all created with masks and stuff. And they just colorize it how they want. I sort of glossed over it, but here you can change like the scaling. And so now, you know, we sort of have, let's turn this off. You know, we start with this like fire effect here. And then we drop in that distortion again here. And, you know, I had it like this. And that's giving us these like long oval shapes, so it looks like, you know, the effect that you see here. Then we can scrunch it down with the tiling. And it can give us a look like this. You know, it could be, I don't know. All I can think of is like sort of magical fire, I don't know. But it looks cool. You could use it for bubbles or something like that too, like underwater. That would look really cool. But you can see how, you know, overlapping these together create some really cool stuff that, you know, it kind of repeats. You can do a little bit to actually fix that. But it, you know, by overlapping two textures like that, you can just get brand new character and really like not have repeating, you know, not monotonous type stuff. Drop that, you know, the same thing, that doesn't do too much. That's pretty cool. This one, yeah, again, it's kind of weird. This one's good for, I was using it for water type stuff. It's really cool. So that's something you'll see a lot, like, let's move down. Just something like this for like water. And some of these aren't tiled, so you'll see, you know, that stuff doesn't look good where it's, you can see the edge. You know, that would be good for some like smoke or something to drop in. Let's see. Like that, we need to clamp this. So I did my best to like have some like dynamic clamping type stuff. but sometimes you're just gonna have to go in and change whether or not something is clamped. And that clamping is really important, so I'll go in and show you like if you don't clamp some of this stuff. Oh, the texture's clamped, so it's gonna, let's see. It's really like, well, it's not really showing up, just lucky for us. Alrighty. Well, let's unclamp this. You get stuff like this. So what's happening is that it's distorting, right? By, you know, we're only doing distortion in the Y direction. The reason is, and you can work around this, is that if you do like the X direction, you get some leaning like this. You know, it's moving to the side because it's going left or right. You can do it where it's like, you know, gray is like 0 distortion instead, and so black would go left and right. And you can actually do colors too, where it's like RGB A, or usually it's just RG, and so like R is your x-axis, G is your y-axis. You can get some complex like swirling and stuff. We'll undo this. Anyway, what's happening is that the UV is, you know, distorting up and down, and it's looping. And so that way, you know, the more distorted it is, that's why like you get this like repetitive nature, because it's grabbing, you know, the texture like over and over. Do you know what I mean? Like it's passing over it multiple times. So I'll clamp that up again. And it can be a bit difficult, you know, how and when to like clamp, because we have this smoke effect. It's not too impressive. You can get some really cool stuff. This one was just something quick I whipped up. Turn down the speeds. So this here. And generally we want to clamp, but sometimes we may want to tile this texture, repeat it, which is the case here. So what I got going on is, you know, this is just, you know, scrolling on the y-axis. The offset is just going like this. You know, it's just this thing. This is a tile texture. It just loops up and down. Now we can have, you know, just like a seamless smoke that comes up like this. And then we do other things to like mask it out. Let's start here. You know, we're just doing this. And then, you know, we layer different things on it. We'll add that mask. I'll actually turn the cutoff off. And then we maybe, you know, automate that movement. So now we have this smoke. And like already, that's pretty cool. We haven't added any distortion yet, but it's a similar concept. It's, you know, using UVs. So we'll take it to the next level and just add a little bit of distortion there. You know, just a little bit of power there. And then maybe animate that a little so it's not so, because in place, you know, this looks pretty good, but the eye can kind of tell, like our eyes are really powerful, you know, that this distortion is sort of static. Like the smoke is panning over it, but it's almost like it's looking through like a foggy type of glass or something. And so we'll also pan this a little bit. You could even pan it sideways if you wanted. It might look a little weird, but it's given us some like counter motion, so it actually looks pretty cool. And that may not be the kind of distortion you want exactly. We could bring this tiling down so it's a bit fatter. You know what I mean? Like, we can turn this up so we can get a better sense of like how it's distorting exactly. See, now we got something more like that. So we'll turn that back down. It's a little bit weird. Maybe because this is... Oh, again, it's because this texture isn't seamless. Let's grab this one. I don't know. It's just that one's so good for like water. I need to grab a seamless one. Anyway, we have that there. You know, here we have it masked off. We don't necessarily need the distortion mask. Again, the distortion mask is like a map for how much it distorts. With the smoke effect, we don't necessarily want that. We may want this because it's applying to this here, which is, you know, how much we sort of just push those UVs around. There's alpha cutoff we talked about in the previous video. It cuts off your alpha, give you more hard edges, a little more stylized. From here, you could take that data and make it more naturalistic, or like, you know, maybe this is a look that you like here. I mean, that looks pretty cool. I don't have it set up here, but another thing you'll see a lot is this concept done as a post-processing effect. So basically, you know, we create like ripples, like, you know, screen space rippling and distortion. It's the same thing. You can even see it as far back as like on the SNES. Go underwater, and we have some like, you know, wave, like the whole screen waves back and forth. But then we, you know, that one was simpler because it's like, it's this basic one-to-one drawing, and they just like throw a sine wave in there and just sort of, you know, sways things back and forth. Here, you know, we do post-processing where we would take this data, slap it on top of our final draw, and then, you know, do that same UV distortion to give us some effects like that. I kind of don't like those effects as post-processing. A lot of effects sort of, I don't know, betray themselves as like an effect rather than something that's actually happening in the game. Do you know what I mean? Like I see the effect more than I actually see like some sort of impact or something happening. Just tile this up, you know, show something like this. You can push this mask around as well to do the same thing. You can even use that to animate if you wanted. We can animate that alpha cutoff, and it'll go like that as we distorted. Let's try to actually distort this harder. Yeah, we're getting some cool stuff where it's going up and down like that. And then let's actually mask off that distortion so at the bottom isn't doing it too much. So now we're getting kind of a cool thing there where this gets really swirly, and there's better effects that can make it more of a swirl. You can just look them up online. I couldn't find a good one. I know they exist. When we do some actual tutorials, we'll go through that. You can already see that's pretty dope. Again, I'm just going to do a quick overview of like what these actually do in the shader settings. We have our main texture here. It draws that speed X and Y control the X and Y offset of the texture itself. We have two distortion maps. They share a mask. You know, the distortion map itself is a texture. Here you can tile and offset it however you like. The power here, X and Y for the first gradient map, excuse me, distortion map. Z and W is X and Y for the second one. Should throw that in there so you can see it. So if we pumped up that Y there, you know, we can get stuff like that. Again, they share this mask, so it's like none of the distortion is going to come down here. You know, and I'm just throwing random things in here, and you can already see that there's some cool stuff. You know, this is just a cloud that I had. Speed is the rotation of, or the panning of those things. So if we go to the left here, this thing is panning left pretty fast. This thing is panning up and down really fast. Kind of hard to see because of the mask. We can take that off. You can see a little bit more. Again, it's kind of hard to see because this is moving by itself. So now if we... Whoops. Or yeah. Let's see. Oh, there's no power on that one. Ha! So scrunch that down a bit. It's doing some weird stuff. Oh, because there's a big space in here. That's why it's like... That's not a good example. We'd want more of a... These. Pump up the speed. See, now you can get those sort of like water effects. That's what I mean by like having like a secondary motion. So like this secondary motion would be pretty cool in here. And then this one, maybe we would want like... I don't know. Go back to that one. Increase the power a bit. It's a little weird. Anyway, you just have to experiment with it. I'm going to turn this speed back on because I think it looks good. Looks a little whack. That looks better. And again, we have this final mask. That, you know, it's basically a mask for cutting off just all pixel data. So, you know, it fades out at the top based on this. Whoops, gosh darn it. Grab something else like that, you know, that's going to get, you know, standard masks are going to look best for this sort of thing. We have the intensity, which just multiplies the pixel data. I don't have any glow effects going on. So you may want to just... But what I was trying to say is that I believe just having this intensity up will work with HDR, I think. You still have to do some post-processing setup, but anyway, that's there. You can also tile that mask like I mentioned before. Offset it, and then the alpha cutoff, just stuff like that. Also had one here. It's a little bit of a ripple effect. Increase the speed a bit. You know what we have here is the same stuff we've seen before, but we have it on our disk mesh. Whoops. You know, it's one of these. Let's see over here. I've laid that same smoke texture across it. It's a good way to get a ripple effect is you zigzag, but then you stretch it all across your ring. This one isn't perfect. That's why it's like, you know, cut off back here. You'd want to make one a little bit better. And then our first step of what we're doing, let's turn the power off here. You may even like this better. It's a lot cleaner. We're just pushing that, you know, along the y-axis at a certain rate, so it just pans out like that. I do have a mask on, so it fades out a bit. You could turn that off if you wanted, but it would kind of depend. You could get some effects that look still pretty good, but that probably looks better. Same cutoff situation. We go from sort of smoky to more naturalistic to like, you know, Wind Waker or something. And again, if you wanted, you can use the same idea, throw it on an actual distortion, like post-processing distortion, and so all this would distort in screen space instead. You know, you can also do reflection maps, you know, and you throw that into the reflection map, and so you have like reflection data, you know, from stuff coming up here or whatever in the scene. But a lot of times just taking whatever data was there and distorting it can look pretty good. especially if you just like push it really hard. Because this is so small, it'll just grab pixel data from up here and sort of slide it around instead. You know what I'm saying? I think that about covers it. Again, this is just an introduction about how they work. Let's hit this up again because it's fun to mess with. What's the fire effect we have? Contest fire. Tutorial something. Just want to show off the different character you can get from this. Again, a lot of the fire character comes from this sort of distortion masking, where very little distortion down here and then a lot up here. Turn all our values on. Take it out a bit. Don't really need a mask. No, cut off, please. And you know, we don't really animate this texture. It's Let's get mad at me. All right, whatever. Throw some Morley noise on there. Again, we do it along the y-axis, so even though it's only along the y-axis, it's still giving us some sort of lateral distortion because stuff is like being smushed down at, you know, like circularly, you know what I mean? So when I was first learning, it's like, what do you mean I can't do X? Like, this looks bad. But in the end, it looks fine. We can also use this for like some, you know, you could put a sine wave on this. This could be pulsing. You know, there's lots of stuff you can do. Normal use, yeah, that's cool. Throw some speed on that. This one isn't tiled, unfortunately, but it looks pretty cool. If we increase the power here. You know, because it's clamped, a lot of that stuff just sort of falls off if you like make it really distorted. Is there a better one we could do? We'll just stick with these. Increase the power a bunch. Get some repeat up in there, which, well, that's not ideal, but sort of mitigate that by throwing more on there. Oh, whoops, get up the power so we know what's happening. So we have like a secondary one on there. Give it some speed. So, you know, it's a little more of like a raging fire. And then from there, you want to like mess with the tiling. Personally, that's what I do. I think it does a lot to change the character of it. Because it sort of stretches out the distortion. Stuff like that. So just kind of grab. Oh, I was doing it on that. Shoot. I thought I was doing it on a new material. I guess not. Well, that's too bad because I really liked how that looked. I don't know how back can we undo. We did a lot today. Take me back. Nice, Unity. I'm proud of you. So yeah, this is before I even started. Again, I tiled this up and down a bit. You know, you can do it with the scaling, but you can get it sort of a different look by scrunching this up. Let's jump that music. This started and end. You know, you can just do some weird stuff. I liked how these kanji sort of just made it give sort of intermittent like puffs. You know what I mean? How it's like sort of slow down here and then some like shoot up there. So you had a few notes. Um, what makes a good distortion map? You know, seamlessness, um, the gradients. You know, it's always like these gradual movements. If you throw in like some harsh stuff, you know, it's gonna just sort of look like what it is. It's not gonna really distort it in a meaningful way. Um, the alpha cutoff is a way to give it a lot of character. You know, we go from something like this to like, you know, CVS2 Capcom looking stuff like this, which I think is pretty dope. And yeah, I don't really do too much like special coloring stuff. It's all, you know, my color and my original texture is sort of based on the alpha already. So as I like crush the alpha down, we get, you know, this character changes a lot. That should do it for now. You know, again, this was just a quickie, just an intro to distortion maps. You know, we'll show in the future how to apply it to things like, you know, our sword slash effects that we've done before. You know, use it for creating particles, you know, which is what we're doing here, or like that bubble thing I mentioned quickly. Let me know if there's an effect you want to see. I like learning new things, so if you don't know about it and I don't know about it, then we'll learn together. And if I know about it, then that's good too. One of the things I hope to do with this series is to provide all the assets that we do during this. You know, it's always frustrating when you search for something and you see an effect, you're like, oh, that's great, and then maybe you have to contact the creator, and like that doesn't lead anywhere. So again, once this is on YouTube, all the assets will be made available that we used. The shader, including all the little textures and things we used. Thanks for joining me. You can contact me at patreon.com/cultureattack or at Twitter at CAS_kicks. Thanks for watching.